Wild sky, the first time I met Dr. Luca Rossi, I was making an emergency landing on a glacial lake with failing hydraulics, and he was standing on the shore yelling at me in Italian about disturbing his research subjects. My Cessna 185 float plane hit the water hard, harder than I liked, but considering my rudder controls were shot and I was flying on instinct and prayer, it could have been worse. I taxied toward the only visible shoreline, killed the engine, and had just started checking for damage when someone started shouting from the beach. "What the hell are you doing? This is a protected research area. You can't just—" He switched to Italian mid-sentence, gesturing wildly with what looked like a radio tracking antenna. I climbed out onto the float, assessed the situation. The lake was remote, maybe 60 miles northwest of Anchorage, surrounded by mountains and spruce forest. No other planes, no roads. Just wilderness and one very angry researcher. "Hydraulics failure," I called back, my voice carrying across the water. This wasn't a recreational landing. "I'm grounded until I can get parts flown in." He was close enough now that I could see him properly, late 20s. Dark curly hair under a beanie, olive skin. Sharp features that would have been handsome if they weren't currently twisted in frustration. Wearing field gear that looked expensive and impractical for Alaska. "Do you have any idea what you've just done? I've been tracking a sow and 2 cubs for 3 days. The noise from your landing just scattered them into the mountains. Months of research gone! Better scattered bears than a dead pilot." I tied off the plane, started wading toward shore. The water was glacial cold, even through my waders. "I'm Harper Jennings, Alaska Air Service, bush pilot." "And you are?" "Dr. Luca Rossi, wildlife biologist, grizzly conservation researcher. And you just destroyed my field work." "I just saved my life. Priorities." I reached the shore, started unpacking my emergency kit. "How far are we from the nearest settlement?" 60 miles. Maybe 70. There's no road access." He was still glaring. "You flew into a protected research zone without clearance. I flew into the nearest suitable water because my plane was about to fall out of the sky." I pulled out my satellite phone, checked for signal. "Weak, but there. Look, Dr. Rossi, I'm sorry about your bears, but I had maybe 90 seconds to find water and land before I lost complete control." This was the closest lake. "So unless you want to file a complaint with my corpse, maybe save the research disruption lecture for later?" His expression shifted, still annoyed, but something softer underneath. "Are you hurt?" "No, plane's damaged, but I'm fine." I started dialing my service. "I need to call in for parts and a mechanic. Could be here a few days, depending on weather and part availability." "A few days?" He looked genuinely distressed. "You can't stay here. This is active research territory. My bears, your bears will be fine. I'll stay with my plane. You stay with your research. We'll pretend the other doesn't exist." I got through to my dispatcher, started explaining the situation. Hydraulics, remote lake, need parts, and extraction. The news wasn't good. Weather system moving in, no flights possible for at least 48 hours. Parts would take another day after that. I was stuck for 3 days minimum. When I hung up, Luca was watching me with an expression I couldn't read. 3 days? He said. "Yeah. You got any coffee in that fancy research camp of yours?" I have a feeling this is going to be a long few days, but here's what I didn't know then. Luca Rossi wasn't just passionate about bears. He was obsessive about them, dedicated to protecting them, willing to camp alone in the Alaskan wilderness for months because someone had to study how grizzlies adapted to climate change. And over the next 3 days, I was going to learn exactly what that dedication looked like and why it was the most attractive thing I'd ever seen. Luca's research camp was a 1/4 mile from the lake. 2 tents, one for sleeping, one for equipment, a bear-proof food cache, solar panels for his electronics, and more scientific gear than seemed reasonable for one person. "You're out here alone?" I asked, accepting the coffee he'd grudgingly offered. "Usually I have a research assistant. She had to fly out last week, family emergency. I stayed because this is critical monitoring time." He was organizing data on a laptop, tracking collar signals. "The sow I'm following, she's one of only 12 collared females in this region. Understanding her denning patterns could—" He stopped. "You don't care about this." I didn't say that. "You're a bush pilot. You fly people and cargo. Research science isn't your world. Flying is how I pay rent. Doesn't mean I don't care about what people are researching. I sat down on a camp chair, stretched out my legs. Been flying since 0400, my back was killing me. Tell me about your bear. He looked at me suspiciously like I was mocking him. Then something in my expression must have convinced him I was serious, because he pulled up a map on his laptop. She's a 12-year-old sow. 2 cubs, both yearlings. She's been ranging in this valley for 8 years. We've got denning data going back to when she was first collared. But this year, her patterns are off. She's ranging farther, staying at lower elevations longer. Could be food scarcity. Could be climate-driven changes in berry availability. Could be human encroachment. He traced her movements on the map. If we can document what's changing and why, we can protect critical habitat before it's too late. The passion in his voice was compelling. Most of my passengers talked about Alaska like it was a backdrop for their adventures. Luca talked about it like it was something precious that needed protecting. "How'd you end up studying bears in Alaska?" I asked. "That accent isn't from here." "Boston. My family's Italian-American, moved to the U.S. when my parents were kids. I did undergrad at BC, grad school in Montana. Postdoc research brought me to Alaska 5 years ago." He shrugged. "Never left. Something about this place, it gets under your skin." "Yeah." I looked around at the mountains, the forest, the big sky. "It does." We spent the afternoon in careful detente. Him tracking his bears, me working on my plane as much as I could without parts. He brought me more coffee around 4, stood at the shore watching me work. "You know a lot about planes," he observed. "Grew up in them. My dad was a bush pilot, taught me to fly when I was 14. Took over his service when he retired. I was elbow deep in the engine compartment, checking connections. Alaska Air Service has been family-run for 40 years. That's actually pretty cool. Thanks." I climbed down from the float. "Your turn. Why bears specifically?" "Because they're apex predators. Because they're indicators of ecosystem health. Because," he paused, "because when I was 8, my family went to Yellowstone. We saw a grizzly from the car. Just this massive, beautiful animal, completely wild and free. I decided right then that I wanted to spend my life understanding them, protecting them." He smiled slightly. "My mom wanted me to be a doctor. Traditional Italian family, you know. But I wanted bears. Disappointed family is universal then. My mom wanted me to go to college, get a stable job. Instead, I'm flying mail and supplies to villages and occasionally crash landing in research zones." "You didn't crash. You made a controlled emergency landing. There's a difference. You defending me now?" "I'm being accurate. It's a scientist thing." But he was smiling. "Harper, I'm sorry I yelled at you earlier. The landing really did scatter my bears, but you were right. Better scattered bears than a dead pilot? Apology accepted." I wiped oil off my hands. "Want to call a truce? We're stuck together for 3 days. Might as well not be enemies. We're not enemies. We're just 2 people with very different jobs who ended up in the same wilderness by accident. And now we're camping neighbors." "Now we're camping neighbors," he agreed. That night, Luca invited me to share dinner. Freeze-dried pasta that he somehow made taste like actual food. Cooked over a camp stove while telling me about bear behavior patterns and seasonal feeding strategies. I found myself genuinely interested, asking questions, learning things I'd never thought about despite flying over this wilderness for years. "You're a good teacher," I said after he'd spent 20 minutes explaining how grizzlies cache food. "You're a good listener." He poured more hot water for tea. "Most people get bored when I talk about my research." "Most people are idiots," he laughed, surprised and genuine. "That's pretty harsh, but accurate. Anyone who doesn't find bear science fascinating is missing out." "Are you flirting with me, or are you just really into grizzlies?" The question caught me off guard. "Can it be both?" "Can it?" He leaned forward slightly, and I saw his eyes in the lantern light, deep brown, intelligent, currently looking at me with something I couldn't quite name. "Yeah." My heart was doing something complicated. "It can. Good to know." He stood up, started cleaning dishes. "Because I've been trying to figure out for the last 6 hours whether you're as attractive as you seem, or if it's just the Alaska wilderness doing something to my brain." "Have you figured it out?" "Not yet, but I'm working on it." He glanced back at me. You should sleep in the equipment tent tonight. Weather's dropping, your plane's not insulated, and I've got a spare sleeping bag. You offering me a sleepover, Dr. Rossi? I'm offering you survival. Alaska's brutal at night. But he was smiling. The flirting is just a side benefit. In that case, I accept. I slept in the equipment tent that night. Not close to Luca, but close enough to hear him breathing, to feel the temperature drop outside and be grateful for the shelter. And at some point in the dark, I realized I was in trouble. Because Dr. Luca Rossi, with his bear passion and Italian-American intensity and the way he talked about conservation like it, was the most important thing in the world. He was getting under my skin faster than Alaska ever had. Day 2, the weather hit overnight, wind and rain that would have been miserable in my plane. By morning, Luca's camp was a little island of warmth and relative comfort while the storm raged outside. Radio says it'll clear by tomorrow, Luca reported, checking forecasts. Your parts are scheduled to fly in tomorrow afternoon if visibility improves. So one more day. I was helping him organize research data, cataloging photos of bear signs and tracking information. Your sow show up yet? Signal puts her about 3 miles north. She's moving, probably found a food source. He pulled up a new map. I should go check, document her location, see if the cubs are still with her. In this weather? It's just rain. I've worked in worse. You're insane. I'm dedicated. He was already packing field gear. You can stay here where it's warm and dry. I'll be back in a few hours. Or I could come with you. Extra set of eyes, someone to watch for bears while you're tracking. He looked at me skeptically. You want to hike 3 miles in the rain to look at bear scat and territorial markings? When you put it that way, it sounds incredibly appealing. You're mocking me. I'm really not. I stood up. Look, I've been flying over this wilderness for years, but I've never actually been in it like this. Never tracked animals. Never understood what you researchers actually do. If you're going out anyway, let me come. Learn something. He studied me for a long moment. Okay, but you follow my lead. If I say don't move, you don't move. If I say run, you run. Bears are unpredictable, and we're in their territory. Got it, boss? Don't call me boss. Yes. Sir, that's worse. We hiked through rain-soaked forest, following Luca's GPS and his instincts about bear movement. He pointed out signs I never would have noticed. Claw marks on trees, disturbed vegetation, scat that told stories about diet and health. The way he read the landscape was like watching someone fluent in a language I didn't speak. There, he whispered, pointing. About 50 yards ahead, through the trees, the sow. Massive, dark brown, moving with the kind of power that made my throat tight. And beside her, 2 cubs, maybe 80 pounds each, playing in a stream. Luca was already documenting. Photos, notes, checking his tracking collar signal. I stood perfectly still, watching, suddenly understanding why he did this. Why he'd camp alone in the wilderness for months. Why he'd yelled at me for scaring them off. These bears weren't just research subjects. They were beautiful, I whispered. Yeah. Luca's voice was soft. They really are. We watched for 20 minutes before the sow moved her cubs into thicker cover. Then we hiked back, soaked and cold, but both grinning like kids. That was incredible, I said once we were back at camp, stripping out of wet gear. I've seen bears from planes, but never like that. Never just being bears. That's what I love about fieldwork. Not the data, though that matters. It's the moments like that. Seeing them in their world, on their terms. He was making hot chocolate, his hair still dripping. Thanks for coming. Most people, they don't get it. But you seem to get it. I did. I accepted the mug he offered. Luca, can I ask you something? Sure. Why are you single? Because you're smart, passionate about your work, not terrible to look at. Seems like someone would have grabbed you by now. He laughed. You think I'm not terrible to look at? That's the part you focus on? It's the interesting part. He sat down across from me. I'm single because I spend 8 months a year in the field. Because I cancel dates to track bears. Because the last person I dated told me I care more about grizzlies than humans. Do you? Sometimes. Yeah. No hesitation. Is that bad? Not if you find someone who understands. I leaned forward. Someone who also disappears into the wilderness for work. Someone who gets that passion for your job isn't a flaw, it's who you are. Someone like a bush pilot? Someone exactly like a bush pilot. The air got heavy. Luca set down his mug, moved closer.
Harper, I should tell you something.
Okay. I've been trying really hard not to be attracted to you. Because you're stuck here, because I don't want to make this weird, because... He stopped. But I'm failing. At the not being attracted part. Good. I reached out, tucked a strand of wet hair behind his ear. Because I stopped trying around hour 3 of yesterday. Yeah? Yeah. I leaned in and he met me halfway. The kiss was slow, careful, tasting like hot chocolate and rain. His hand came up to my jaw, mine found his waist, and everything about him was exactly right. When we broke apart, we were both breathing hard. That was, Luca started. Yeah, we should, probably. We kissed again, deeper this time. His hands in my hair and mine pulling him closer. When we finally stopped to breathe, his forehead rested against mine. I love you, he said quietly, which is insane because I've known you 36 hours. But I do. I love you too. My voice was rough, which is equally insane, but also it doesn't feel insane. It feels right. Yeah. He pulled back to look at me. It does. Day 3, the weather cleared. My parts arrived via another bush pilot. Luca helped me install them while explaining grizzly denning behavior and somehow making hydraulic repair romantic. You're good at this, he said, watching me work. Flying? Yeah, I'm okay. No, being here. In the wilderness. Most people from civilization, they don't adapt. But you just fit. Alaska gets under your skin. You said so yourself. It does. But it takes most people years. You did it in 3 days. Maybe I had a good teacher. I tightened the last connection, tested the hydraulics. Smooth. Perfect. She's ready. So you're leaving. His voice was carefully neutral. Yeah. I've got mail runs scheduled, supplies to deliver. That's the job. I climbed down from the float. But Luca, I want to see you again. When you're back in Anchorage. If you want that, I want that. A lot. He pulled out his phone, we exchanged numbers. I've got 2 more weeks in the field. But after dinner? Somewhere with actual walls and food that isn't freeze-dried? Absolutely. I pulled him close, kissed him there on the shore with mountains watching and his research equipment beeping in the background. Thank you. For the coffee, the shelter, the bear tracking. For this. All of it. Thank you for crash landing in my research zone. That's a weird thing to be grateful for. It's a perfect thing. He kissed me again. Fly safe, Harper. Stay safe. With the bears, always. Epilogue. 4 months later, bush flying doesn't stop for relationships. Neither does bear research. But we made it work. His field seasons and my flight schedules somehow syncing up enough that we built something real. I started timing my supply runs to pass over his research zones, buzzing his camp to drop mail and supplies. He started coming back to Anchorage between field sessions, staying at my place, cooking actual food while I filed flight plans. We met each other's worlds, his bear conservation team who grilled me about my intentions, my pilot crew who were mostly just relieved I'd found someone who understood the hours, his family in Boston video called to meet the Alaskan pilot who likes bears. My mom was thrilled I'd finally found someone with a real education. One day, 4 months after the emergency landing, I flew Luca back to his research lake, scheduled trip this time. Full clearance, no hydraulic failures. You know what's funny? He said as I taxied toward shore. What? If your plane hadn't broken down, we never would have met. Are you saying you're glad my hydraulics failed? I'm saying some emergencies lead to the best destinations. He leaned over, kissed me in the cockpit. I love you, you know that? I love you too. I kissed him back, tasting coffee in Alaska morning. Even your crazy bears, especially my bears, he was grinning. They led me to you. 4 months after an emergency landing, sitting in a float plane on a glacial lake with a wildlife biologist who loved bears as much as I loved flying, I realized something. Sometimes the worst situations lead to the best outcomes. Sometimes the person who yells at you in Italian becomes the person who makes Alaska feel like home. That's not a bad story. That's not bad at all.